What happens when a beloved Marvel superhero meets one of the most outspoken panels on daytime television, only for the discussion to take an unexpected turn no one in the studio predicted? The show opens with the familiar, buzzing set of The View. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the picture of calm, is seated at the center, and to her right, Joy Behar, armed with a sharp, knowing smile that promises a bit of mischief, scans her notes. Across the table, an approachable and genuinely grinning Mark Ruffalo. Whoopi leans forward to address the audience. "It is such a pleasure to welcome back Mark Ruffalo." The studio audience explodes, some members leaping to their feet, and Mark lets out a hearty laugh. "Oh, that's so nice of you, thanks." Before the applause dies, however, Joy pipes up. "You know, you always get the big applause here. I'm beginning to take it personally." Mark beams. "If you want, I can take some of that home for you." It's lighthearted, a friendly barb in a cozy environment, but in a room full of strong personalities, how long will this comfortable atmosphere last? Whoopi opens by diving right into his busy life. "You've been all over the place lately, producing, acting, activism. You're everywhere." Mark nods, his grin never faltering. "Well, the best way to keep out of trouble is to keep busy." Joy tilts her head, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Is it, though?" The audience chuckles softly as they sense a shift. Mark smiles. "That depends who you ask." "Well," Whoopi continues, "a lot of people feel you've been quite outspoken lately." Before Whoopi can even finish, Joy jumps in. "Very outspoken." If you watch carefully, you can catch a slight tightening of Mark's smile. Joy doesn't let up. "You've made some rather strong political statements recently online, at rallies. It's not like you're just playing superheroes anymore." A murmur begins to ripple through the studio audience. The room is starting to get tense. Mark nods slowly, his voice even and calm. "I've always felt if you've got a platform, you should use it responsibly." Joy leans forward. Responsibly, though, is very subjective. There it is, the first real crack. Mark remains unflappable. "Sure, but silence is also a choice." The audience claps, a little more emphatically this time, but Joy stays unyielding. "But aren't you concerned," she probes, "that with celebrity outspokenness there's sometimes oversimplification of complex issues?" Mark's response is immediate. "And you're not concerned that with political outspokenness there's also oversimplification of complex issues?" A collective inhale followed by scattered laughter, then a roaring applause. Joy's smile is still present, but it's as thin as tissue paper. "I'm not a politician," she says flatly. Mark nods, his eyes locked on hers. "Neither am I." Whoopi tries to interject. All right, everybody take a deep breath." The audience laughs again, but the tension has definitely settled in. Joy continues. "My point is, people expect you to be the Hulk. They don't expect a political treatise." Mark's tone changes. Still measured, but a new edge of steel has entered his voice. "I don't do political treatises. I talk about issues that concern people." Joy doesn't back down. "But you frame them politically." Mark pauses, letting the weight of his words sink into the room, then delivers the blunt truth. "Because they are." A collective gasp fills the studio. Whoopi glances from one to the other, knowing exactly where this is going. "And we're only getting started," she sighs, "and I feel like we're already at war." Mark manages a weak chuckle. "I promise I'm not here to fight." But as Joy locks eyes with him and snaps back, "Nobody is fighting." It's clear this casual daytime interview has evolved into something far more contentious, and neither panelist nor guest is willing to back down. Remember to subscribe to Showdowns and like and comment if you enjoy deep dives into the most intense moments on daytime TV. Do you feel that celebrities have an obligation to speak out, or that by speaking out you just further divide the audience? Mark looks and hesitates before replying. "I think that pretending that we're all living in different worlds is what is actually dividing the audience," and a few in the crowd burst into applause, but most don't, and a heavy silence descends. Already Joy Behar is shaking her head. "But aren't people buying a ticket to a Marvel movie because they want a story and not a political speech?" Mark doesn't even blink at her question. "They are buying a ticket to a story about justice, power, and responsibility." The applause in the crowd gets a little louder. Joy isn't letting him off the hook. That's fictional justice, Mark. Mark has the faintest of smirks playing on his face. Does it? The studio goes dead silent for a split second. Whoopi is even leaning forward, intrigued. Elaborate on that. Mark leans forward, his hands planted on the table now. Stories resonate because there's reality there to speak to. The stories have a grip on people because there's an element of their own lives, struggles, that is speaking to them, and Joy crosses her arms. That's a stretch, Mark. Mark's eyes are narrowed, but it's not in anger. They're narrowed with an intense focus. Is it? The Hulk is a story about anger, about control, and about feeling powerless in the face of a system that is too big to fail? The applause comes from the audience again, but it's Joy again with a quick remark. Now you're just criticizing your own franchise. And Mark shrugs. We all criticize culture, that's what a talk show does, isn't it? That gets a huge laugh from the audience, even Whoopi is cracking a smile. Joy has a tight, almost pained smile on her face. Touch? The tension still has not exploded, but it certainly is simmering, and Whoopi decides it's best to try to guide them into calmer waters, or so she thinks. Let's shift to something more specific. You've spoken out about environmental policy recently. Joy's energy picks up and she nods. That's right. Mark nods back. That's right. Joy leans in again. You criticize some politicians quite directly. Mark doesn't flinch. I criticize policy. Joy is on him again. Who? Mark is remarkably calm as he says, accountability demands clarity. The applause builds again, but now it's not uniform. There are hesitant cheers mixed with excited roars, and the temperature in the studio feels like it's rising, and Joy tilts her head and her voice gets lower and softer. Or division. Mark immediately cuts back. The division is already there. The murmur of the audience grows louder. You can practically feel the heat. Whoopi recognizes that she's losing control of the room, and that the conversation is going somewhere the rest of the group may not want, and decides that they must have one more question before they go to commercial. Mark, do you feel like that has an impact on your career? Mark nods with complete honesty. Sure, but fear shouldn't dictate what you stand for. Joy is immediately in with a sharp remark. It's easy for you to say you don't have that pressure on you because you've already been successful, and the room gives a sharp intake of breath and the silence lasts for what feels like forever. Mark pauses again and takes his words slowly as he responds, success does not protect you from the consequences. Joy fires back. It certainly buffers you. The air in the studio is palpable. Whoopi raises her hand, sensing that this segment needs to end, and says, we are definitely going to pick this up when we come back from the break, because clearly we have a lot more to unpack. The applause in the room is enthusiastic, but also with a touch of unease, and the lights go down. Mark is no longer playing the role of the press touring actor. He's a man engaged in an intellectual war. What happens when the lights come back up? Stay tuned and be sure to like and subscribe to Showdowns to see the conclusion of this heated debate. Joy adjusts her papers on the table, but she can't tear her eyes off Mark. As the break music drifts in and out, Whoopi offers a gracious smile to the camera. We'll be right back. As the crane shot zooms out, a low hum of whispers fills the studio. Heads are shaking no in disbelief. Other heads are nodding in agreement. Off mic, Mark and Joy exchange a few quiet, stern words. Not angry, but definitely not backing down. This is no longer a cordial press junket. It has officially become a deeper conversation, and we've only just scratched the surface. When the red light flashes back on, the applause that erupts is overwhelming with the sheer power of expectation. Whoopi smiles warmly and lands in, feeling the energy. All right, we're back with Mark Ruffalo, and we were in the middle of a conversation. Joy lets out a small, crisp laugh. That's a diplomatic way of putting it, she says with a wry smile. I'm still here, Mark states with a calm politeness. Whoopi looks between them with a knowing smile. Let's keep it constructive. Joy, your point was about consequences of fame and how it could be amplified by certain actions. Joy sits up straight, a picture of concentration. Yes, my concern is with specific politicians being targeted by people with large followings. You realize, Mark, that the words carry an incredible amount of weight, do you not? Mark surprisingly agrees. I do. Joy blinks in surprise. You do? I do, he reiterates, which is precisely why I choose them with extreme care. A wave of murmurs washes over the room, some showing agreement and others expressing intense skepticism. Joy, however, continues, not missing a beat. But don't you ever think that your activism could be adding fuel to the fire instead of contributing to solutions? Mark pauses thoughtfully before replying, his tone never wavering. That's not to say people aren't outraged, but outrage doesn't necessarily stem from tweets. It often stems from experiences. A small smattering of applause breaks out, but the silence in the remainder of the room is deafening. Joy leans in again. But you are often adding to it. I am often reflecting it, Mark replies, his voice quiet but firm. The studio audibly gasps, the classic wow effect that's also infused with genuine tension. Whoopi comes in to diffuse the situation slightly. Mark, what is the ultimate endgame when you're posting things of a political nature? Accountability, awareness, pressure for change. Joy interjects, pressure from Hollywood. Mark tilts his head, an implied challenge in his gaze. Pressure from citizens. Joy's shoulders slump slightly. You aren't just a citizen. Mark's expression hardens. That does not exclude me. A deafening round of applause fills the studio. Joy looks to the audience briefly, then back to her guest. Nobody's excluding you. My question is whether it's responsible to allow a level of fame to drive political discussion. Fame, Mark says with a knowing smile, doesn't drive conversation, it amplifies it. Exactly, Joy exclaims. And if there's something that deserves amplifying... The audience erupts in applause, but Joy quickly raises a hand. Here is where we fundamentally disagree. You operate under the assumption that your position should be the voice that's amplified. Mark's tone changes again, still calm, but much more definitive. No, I operate under the assumption that issues concerning millions of people deserve attention. Joy crosses her arms, staring directly at him. And for the other side? Mark's stare doesn't waver. They have plenty of platforms. A gasp followed by boos can be heard from the audience. Whoopi chuckles with a knowing smile. Getting a little feisty in here, aren't we? She says before the laughter dies down. Joy is still locked in with Mark. Do you truly think that your activism is bringing people together? Mark's reply is a blunt, chilling honesty. Not always. The word hangs in the air like a poisoned dart. Joy's brow arches, clearly seeing an opening. So it's dividing people. Mark slowly nods his head. Sometimes unity demands some level of discomfort. The audience lets out a collective, "Ooh!" Joy shakes her head slowly, her voice filled with conviction. Or sometimes it alienates half the country. Mark doesn't even blink. Half the country is not a monolith. The scattered applause that follows is surprisingly intense. Joy leans in, the space between them closing as the exchange builds into a frenzy. Is Mark Ruffalo a hero to his people, or simply another celebrity shouting into the void? Stick with us, subscribe and like Showdowns to get a full analysis of this unforgettable television moment. But if you frame every single thing in terms of black and white, of right and wrong, then that means disagreeing with you automatically makes someone wrong, says Joy. Mark's eyes are narrowed, not in rage, but in that sharp, intense glare he often employs. I'm talking about human rights, he states. And for me, there's no gray area in human rights. The audience erupts in applause, which rattles the studio. Joy is already prepared with a comeback. But policies are complex. Economics are complex. Geopolitics are complex. And it's rarely a matter of good versus evil. Mark nods unexpectedly. I agree. Joy is genuinely stunned. You agree? I do. His voice carries considerable weight. Complexity does not negate morality. A dense, pregnant silence falls over the studio. That single statement hangs heavily in the air. Whoopi breaks the tension with a gentle prompt. Mark, tell me personally, has any of this cost you friends? Professional relationships? A long pause from Mark feels agonizing. Yes. That bare, honest statement immediately changes the energy of the room. Joy's expression softens, just marginally. Really? Yes, Mark whispers, his voice thick with emotion. People often don't appreciate it when you speak to the powerful about their authority. The audience leans in, hushed. Joy is still intrigued. Her tone is now almost searching. Have you ever regretted the costs? Mark takes a long, deep breath before replying. Every time. His response lands with the force of a physical blow. Whoopi nods slowly, her eyes full of understanding. That is real. Joy studies him for a moment before asking, why continue then? Mark's answer is unwavering, steady. When I look at my children, I think about the world that they will inherit. A wave of emotional applause washes over the studio. Joy nods, but without concessions. But what about the people watching who feel offended by what you say? If people feel offended by an argument for basic human dignity, Mark replies, then perhaps the question is for them to ask why they feel that way. Tension electrifies the room instantly, a wave of murmur rippling through the audience, a palpable split in response. Joy's tone is now sharp again, because perhaps they feel differently about human dignity. Mark is unmoved. Human dignity is not subjective. The studio explodes in noise, people jumping to their feet. Joy looks out at the crowd, then back at Mark. This is what I mean, she says, a note of exasperation in her voice. The implication of that statement is that anyone who doesn't agree with you is against human dignity. No, Mark counters smoothly. The implication is that you don't agree with policies that trample on human dignity. The speed of their exchange accelerates, their words slicing through each other like lightning. Whoopi raises a hand. Okay, let's try and go slower here. But Joy is not stopping. Do you think there's room for conservative voters in the audience you're speaking to? Absolutely, Mark replies without missing a beat. Even if they disagree with what you're saying? Especially if they disagree with what I'm saying. A collective gasp from the audience, genuine surprise evident in their reaction. Joy continues, then why not have conversations rather than just make statements? Mark pauses, weighing his words carefully. Listening doesn't always perform as well on cable television. Laughter ripples briefly, dissipating the tension momentarily. Joy allows herself a small smile. Fair. I do listen, Mark insists. I have conversations that never make headlines. Joy retreats into her chair, a look of doubt in her eyes. So all of this is just posturing? No, Mark states, his conviction unshakable. This is the public manifestation. Whoopi nods, digesting the word carefully. An important distinction. Joy looks to Whoopi. Is it? Whoopi shrugs. Visibility is important. Joy turns back to Mark. But in the absence of negotiation, it just turns into noise. Mark's tone is firm. What compromise am I making? Tone, Joy says. The way you present the argument. I don't compromise on principle, Mark declares. Thunderous applause fills the room. Joy's expression tightens. And that is how polarization starts. Or, Mark counters, meeting her gaze head-on. How clarity emerges. The roar of the audience is now deafening, a cacophony of applause and sharp murmurs. The room is tearing itself in two, mirroring the reality they are debating. This is more than a TV debate. It's a primal battle of wills, a confrontation that leaves everyone in the room transformed. So what do you think? Was Mark sticking to his principles, or was Joy pointing out a division? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to Showdowns for more unflinching clashes of celebrity wills. Whoopi picks up on the gravitas in the room. We are clearly not going to resolve this today. She sighs to a nervous yet palpable, nervous burst of laughter from the audience. Joy looks down at her cards but does not turn them over. I just think that when you are on a public stage, you are supposed to tread lightly and not preach. And when you have influence, I think you have to tread lightly not to stay silent, is Mark's perfectly devastating reply. A stone-cold silence falls upon the studio. Mark's comment hangs like a physical entity in the room. Joy has stopped smiling and is just staring at Mark. The audience does not applaud and looks, at first, completely frozen, trying to process the power of the statement that just left Mark's mouth. The tension is not explosive and loud, but it is personal and has made the room heavy. Whoopi shifts in her seat to look at the two of them. Okay, let's take this somewhere productive because this is clearly bigger than just tweet posts. Joy exhales a short half-laugh. It always is. Mark simply nods. It is. Whoopi folds her hands in her lap and digs in more. Mark, some would argue actors are stepping on terrain once reserved for journalists or policymakers. And Joy's concern, I think it is only fair to clarify here, is about influence without responsibility. What is your response? Influence always has accountability, and that comes with consequence. I'm scrutinized and attacked on a daily basis. That is consequence. Joy interrupts before Mark is able to finish his statement. That is not responsibility, though. Mark slowly turns his head towards Joy and in an extremely calm voice says, Explain. Joy leans in and raises her voice with conviction. When you post something political to an audience of millions and they take your post as fact or guidance, you are influencing opinions without being able to be held accountable in the same way you are if you're a journalist or if you're a politician. You are not beholden to an electorate. A murmur passes through the crowd with people shaking their heads. Mark nods slowly. That is true. Joy raises an eyebrow and waits for the but. But I am accountable. Not in an election, but through my career, my relationships, and my credibility. Joy shakes her head. They are not the same thing, though. Nothing structurally changes for you when you're wrong. My credibility changes, Mark says, tightening just a bit. And it's because I'm wrong. And it changes to your fan base, Joy replies. To me. The crowd emits a quiet murmur with this comment. It has turned somewhat intimate and vulnerable. Whoopi jumps in. Joy, do you think actors and performers should completely stay out of politics? No, I don't, Joy says readily. I don't think anyone should stay out of politics. I think there's a difference between participation and leadership. Mark's reply is immediate. I'm not leading anything. Joy gestures wildly with both hands. Respectfully, Mark, you are. And even if you're not actively trying to be, you are. Mark leans back with a more thoughtful expression on his face and responds. Perhaps the problem is not that stars are speaking, but why anyone believes what stars have to say in the first place. The audience erupts again with a murmur of shocked applause. Joy has to stop for a second to take it all in. Now that is the different conversation to have. That's the same conversation. Explain further. If you look to the stars for your morals, then that has to say something about where we are with the people who are responsible for moral leadership. The audience applauds wildly again. Joy takes a moment and then says in a more reflective rather than accusatory tone. Or it has to say something about the obsession with stardom. Mark gives a slow, subtle, almost mocking smile, and the interview continues to be as intense as ever. What do you think? Are we looking to stars for answers because leaders have failed us, or is star-driven influence inherently dangerous to the democratic process? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Showdowns for all the most intense interviews on television. That too, Joy allows, and a momentary shared spark of understanding passes between them. Joy shifts in her chair and narrows the focus of the question. Let me ask you this. Have you ever posted something and then thought, you know what? I probably shouldn't have said that out loud? Mark doesn't miss a beat. Yes. The audience audibly gasps, taken aback by the bluntness of his reply, and Joy leans forward as if she feels she's close to something. I have deleted things. I've apologized for things before. Joy gives a slow nod, her expression impossible to read, and says, Okay, good. I'm not going to say that I haven't. But Joy is not through. Your statements sometimes sound very conclusive. There is no room for debate. Mark gives her a shrewd look. His eyes narrow slightly. Well, this is a debate, isn't it? The audience laughs. Joy smiles ruefully. You know what I mean. Mark nods slowly. I do, but sometimes an immediate response doesn't necessarily sound gentle. But that urgency can push people away, Joy insists. But so can indifference, Mark shoots back. The debate is growing sharp, fast. Whoopi raises her voice slightly to keep control. Hold on, okay? The audience laughs nervously and Whoopi adds, and that's when people at home start picking teams instead of trying to listen. Joy looks toward Whoopi. They are already picking teams. Mark nods slightly. They always are. There is a brief, palpable silence in the studio where you can practically hear the hum of the studio equipment. Joy looks back at Mark, her words carrying real weight. Here's my real concern. Sometimes, when the celebrity voice of morality speaks in absolutes, it can totally shut down debate, and it can make someone like me feel like because I disagree, then I am the bad person. Mark takes a breath. His voice is slightly softer. I don't want anybody to feel like a bad person. But can you see how it is happening? Joy questions him quickly. Mark thinks for a second and gives an answer that completely changes the energy of the room. Yes. Joy's eyes widen in genuine surprise. You do? I see how aggressive language can feel like a personal attack. The audience is murmuring with empathy now. Joy continues in a quieter tone. That is all I am saying. But I also see how an absence of voices is a personal attack to someone who is hurting. Mark responds. The audience bursts into applause, louder than before. Joy gently tries to draw common ground. But is that really a discussion on social media? That's where the people are, Mark replies. But that's where nuance dies, Joy interjects. The audience laughs again and relief begins to flood the room. Mark offers a slight smile. Nuance struggles on live TV, too. The audience's laughter gets louder. Even Whoopi breaks into a smile. Joy playfully jabs at Mark with her finger. Don't drag us into this. Mark simply shrugs. We are here. The tension is broken for a moment, but Joy still has more questions. She leans forward once more. Do you think there has been a cost to you personally? To your career, as far as jobs go, because of your advocacy? Mark hesitates. Probably. But you still work, Joy points out with an edge returning to her voice. So that threat is sort of hypothetical? A faint gasp echoes through the room. Mark's entire expression changes and he leans in, his eyes steely. It's not theoretical when you're in the eye of the storm. But you have a career that hasn't ended, Joy presses. Mark's voice remains measured, but it is firmer than we have heard it all day. That is not the only measure of consequence. A few people in the crowd clap loudly. Joy watches him closely and whispers, What is? Mark lets the silence stretch for a beat. Peace. Relationships. Safety. The room is completely silent. Joy's expression melts away, the fight gone. Safety? When you make strong statements, you receive threats, Mark explains. A collective gasp runs through the audience. Joy sinks back slightly in her chair, the wind taken out of her sails. That is not okay. No, Mark states simply. It is not. Whoopi nods, her voice serious. Nobody should have to endure that. In that moment, for the first time, there is no debate, just a shared understanding of a terrible consequence. Some real threats don't make the headlines and aren't retweeted as easily as outrage does. What do you think the real cost is when speaking out? Tell us in the comments and subscribe to Showdowns for more unrestrained moments from the world of entertainment. She sees him differently this time. The sharpness of her argument softens a little bit and gives way to something a lot more human. I don't want to feel threatened, she says, quite forcefully. This argument isn't about making you shut up. He nods his head, because she has constructed this bridge very carefully. I know. It's about whether or not what we say about an issue is actually making it better, she continues. Sometimes help looks messy, Mark replies immediately. The room is applauding steadily and reflectively. She sighs lightly, the weight of the entire morning having finally begun to catch up to her. I just feel like we're shouting, she sighs. Then we should just do a better job of having conversations, he replies, nodding. He gestures to the room. The room applauds, nervously, then more fully. She smiles slightly. And you think this is better? He says. We are having a conversation, she says, smiling back slightly. The audience claps louder, sensing something important and breaking through. Whoopi leans toward the camera, then looks back at the panelists. It is, she says. She looks at him and nods. We are. They haven't solved the problems, but something has definitely shifted. The debate has changed from a battlefield to a dialogue. He leans forward one last time. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, he says. Good, she says quickly. The slight glimpse of the original joy shines through. But I do expect the space to express that I care loudly, he says. The room claps louder. She meets his gaze. And I expect the space to question loudly, she says. He nods. Fair enough. There's a beat of silence now. The silence of live TV when a moment is truly happening. The audience waits to cheer, waits to hold its breath, not sure of what's next. Whoopi finally interrupts the silence. Well, she says. A ripple of laughter passes through the room, but the atmosphere is electric. The problem hasn't been resolved, but it's deeper, and no longer a fight between two hostile individuals. The applause is strong, steady, and the room seems to acknowledge that they just watched something real. She looks at him, then at the audience. Well, it's been quite a morning, she says, with the slight smile on her lips. More tense giggles from the room. She adjusts her glasses and breathes out. It has, she says. He nods. Yeah. No one leaps into the void left by that sentence. There's no fight now, just consideration. She smiles at him, her gaze softening again. I appreciate that you didn't get up and storm off, Whoopi says. The room chuckles louder. I've been in this business too long, she says. I don't storm. I didn't flip any tables, he jokes. The room is roaring now, and she can't help but laugh. But I will say this, she begins. What I think America is watching is two people who may not agree on method, but clearly agree on the values. She nods slowly. I can say that's fair. I think that's fair too, he says. She looks at him again. I don't question that you care, Mark. And I don't question that you care, Joy, he says. The room has returned to a slow but building round of applause. She continues, her voice steady. My point is that we are talking at each other and never having a dialogue, she says. He watches her carefully. And I think that, yes, dialogue hasn't worked for the people who are suffering, he admits. But declarative speeches make people turn away who might otherwise be interested, she says. The dialogue between the two of them becomes much softer, although not any less passionate. Whoopi interjects, I'm pretty sure you're both right. The room applauds. A beat of silence again, and she looks at him, then folds her hands. I don't want actors to be silenced, but I also don't want the argument to become a megaphone war. Don't forget to subscribe to Showdowns and hit the notification bell. We'll bring you all the political and social showdowns you've ever wanted. Let us know in the comments who you side with and why, or tell us you agree with both of them. We'll see you in the next one. Mark nods slowly. And I do not want silence to be seen as agreement. The audience murmurs once again, that familiar split reaction that spanned the entire hour. Whoopi looks straight into the camera lens. And this is why we all struggle with these talks. Joy turned to Mark, and the tone has a whole new shift. Would you ever consider a town hall instead of just posting on the internet? Mark smiles slightly. I've done a few. Joy raises an eyebrow, eyes keen. I mean televised town hall. Mark laughs. This is the first real moment of lightness he's had all hour long. Now you're producing my career. The audience laughs with Mark, and Joy shrugs. I'm just saying, it's different in person. It is. And much more courageous in person than behind a keyboard, Joy added. Mark's retort was quick, and much more human in a room. There's another beat of real agreement between them. The quietest beat there's been yet. Whoopi leans back and spreads her hands wide. Look at that. We found some common ground. Warm applause fills the studio, though the earlier tension remains somewhere around the edges. Whoopi glances at the clock. We're going to be out of time. Joy's expression has settled into a more contemplative mood as she turns back to Mark. I'm glad you stayed in the seat. Mark smiles back at her. I respect questions when they're strong. Joy never misses a beat. Well then, you're going to love these next questions. The audience bursts into a laugh as Mark replies, I can see that. In that moment, a true connection between the two adversaries is visible. A mutual respect has been found between two fighters. Whoopi addresses the audience directly. Here's what it is. Nobody in this room has all of the answers. None of us, and certainly not Mark, and absolutely not anybody on the internet. The audience has a sustained, standing ovation. Mark and Joy both give a slow, deliberate nod. Exactly. Exactly, Joy adds. Whoopi continues, but sitting here and talking it out, that's the important part. As the segment begins to fade, you can see audience members on the sidelines turning to each other, some nodding in agreement to Joy's comments, others arguing quietly with the points Mark made. Off camera, the producer can be heard faintly signaling the last few seconds. Whoopi turns back to Mark. Is there anything you would like to say to those people watching who are in disagreement with you? Mark looks down and speaks thoughtfully. I just hope that we can continue to disagree without dehumanizing each other. The audience is on their feet and applauding louder than ever. Joy looks at him once and nods. Now I can certainly agree with that. Whoopi smiles. And with that, we will take a break. As the camera fades to black, the studio is eerily silent. No one is running off stage. No one is yelling. Just soft, intense whispers. Soon, the audience members are pulling out their phones, their thumbs flying across the screen. In a few short minutes, those clips start appearing online. By the end of the show, there are entire categories emerging. Mark Ruffalo, the calm, principled actor. Joy Behar, asking what we all want to ask. Hashtags emerge and start trending. Silence is also a choice. Human dignity is not subjective. The camera has been turned off, but the confrontation isn't over. What do you think? Was this a true dialogue or just a way to pour gasoline on the flames? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Compromise on what? And listening does not have to be an upward trend. These two phrases immediately spread like wildfire to every form of social media, and within an hour, commentary on each topic was overwhelming on comment threads around the web. Some audience members, however, thought that this was exactly what should happen on daytime television. A moment of raw, authentic difference without it degrading into screaming matches. Other viewers thought that it was absolute proof that political feelings were now impacting absolutely everything, even celebrities on talk shows. By the early afternoon, it was a mad rush of entertainment news blogs sending reporters out to flood the gates, with headlines detailing every single aspect of the conflict. Was the argument intense? Yes. Was it vicious? Not quite. The producers later verified that after the cameras had stopped rolling, Mark and Joy had spoken for a brief moment before he was on his way. They exchanged no harsh words or ignored each other. They simply had a short conversation before Mark's departure. In fact, a staff member said that he thanked the whole panel for having such an in-depth discussion. Then, during a later segment on that same afternoon, Joy told the audience casually, "I like when guests push back," which again erupted with a standing ovation. The conversation quickly turned into one of those legendary talk show exchanges that people discuss for weeks and weeks. But it was not a moment that anyone stormed out of. Instead, it was a moment of real anger and hurt over the divide, but no one actually physically acted on that anger in the studio. By the next day, people were debating about this segment on various news outlets. Do celebrities have the right to advocate their opinion? Should the talk shows ask challenging questions? One thing for sure was, everyone kept talking about the moment. Some thought that Mark was justified in his strong stance on his views, and others thought that Joy was justified in questioning the genuine impact of what celebrity activists do. A third group believed both were right, but ultimately that the argument was a mirror of how divided, and yet simultaneously united, society has become. Back in the studio the following week on the show, the discussion was still briefly on people's minds. Joy looked at the audience and smiling said, "Well, that got people talking." Whoopi was, of course, the final word in this instance, saying, "That is the norm." And that is the post. No cancel culture, no controversy, no apology. Just one argument which hit a cultural nerve, and people went on talking about it for a very long time. And so, your turn. What did you make of the discussion? Was Mark right for being so outspoken, or was Joy right for challenging the power that celebrity activists have? Did it help bring down the divide between people, or is this the exact issue which is widening the rift? Tell me what you think below, and please subscribe to Showdowns if you want to hear the behind-the-scenes and inside-the-moment true stories about some of the best talk show performances ever.